Hello everybody, I'm doing a live. It's not my normal time for a live, but I thought I'd do one, give people the chance to ask questions about anything paranormal, anything aliens, anything crop circles. Feel free to ask, Bigfoot, and I'll try and use my 30 years of research to answer your questions. So what I normally do is I normally pick a subject at random and waffle on until someone asks me a question to do with anything to do with paranormal or anything like that. So I will just start off with giants, because if you've watched my videos, you'll see that I'm dealing with giants at the moment. So giants, we've all seen films with giants in. Jack and the Beanstalk was actually derived from original story, not a fiction story, but a mythology. And then there's Cyclopses. So if you've seen the films Jason and the Argonauts, for example, and you see a Cyclops, which is about 10 foot or more, 14 foot tall, they were actually based on mythological, although some people would argue they weren't mythological, but they're based on mythological in the film, giant cyclopses. Now, cyclopses throughout the world have been suggested that there have been giant cyclopses. So what is a giant cyclops and where does it come from? So if you look at the Anunnaki from the position of them having relationships with humans and then creating the Nephilim, which is another word for giants. Not all of the Nephilim turned out to be fine. Some of them ended up being very, very tall, so tall. I mean, there's reports out there of 450 foot tall, which I struggle with, but there's also deformities that they had. So such as 6 fingers, 2 rows of teeth, red hair. No, that's not a deformity, but they did have, majority of them had red hair, and other facial deformities. And there's one of my upcoming videos, actually, it shows a giant skull that has a deformity on it, and the scientists are unsure whether it's a human or a mantis. Now, you'd think they would know, but so Cyclops having one eye isn't so strange, a giant Cyclops. Now, there's one that was supposed to be the son of Enki. Now, if that's true, obviously we know Enki lived for hundreds of thousands of years. So where he had Cain and Abel, where he fathered Cain, Abel, Seth from a human, what's to stop him, 1,000, 2,000 years later, after they had long gone, what's to stop him from having more relationships with human people? So in the end, he could have quite easily had other offspring with other humans, and they could have ended up being giants. Now that would make more sense, because King Anu, Enki's father from the planet Nibiru, didn't like and certainly his brother Enlil didn't like the fact that the bloodline from the Anunnaki was getting tainted, especially with these giants that now were becoming cannibalistic and eating poor little people. So it makes sense that Enki could have had more children than what was just written, and that thus the flood was to try and wipe out that lineage of these giants that shouldn't have really been there, and obviously ruining the bloodline of the gods, because although Anunnakis were on the earth, there was only supposedly 12 gods, which was Enki, Enlil, and so on. So for the royals to have had relationships with their humans, that was a really bad thing. The Anunnaki were probably doing it fine, but once Enki started doing it and they got out of hand, because obviously Cain, Abel, and Seth were allowed to be alive and were actually welcomed by King Anu, until obviously Cain done what he did with Abel. So just throwing it out there while I've got watchers. If you've got any paranormal questions or anything to do with crop circles, anything like that, just feel free to ask. Otherwise, I will just keep waffling on about a particular subject until someone asks a question. So just going back to Cain, Abel, etc. So they were supposedly a little bit taller than. I mean, mainstream say they were about 91 foot. But I struggle with that because apparently, if you read the ancient texts, it translates that. Sorry, I'm forgetting which one went up. One of them went up to their spaceships, and obviously 91 foot. That means they would have had a spaceship capable of having that sort of height of a person. So I don't think he was 91 foot. Someone says, do you believe in Jinn? So for those that don't know, Jinn is another name for, well, Aladdin's genie was a Jinn actually. So the Jinn are supposedly bad energy, bad light beings. There's no real name for them other than Jinn. So they're described as sort of the equivalent of our soul. So we have light beings that enter us 3 to 4 months in the mother's womb, and these are not bad, but they're not good. They're just really here to learn. But the Jinn supposedly are bad, and they'll attach themselves to objects. They'll attach themselves just like the genie's lamp, and that's one of the stories of what a genie does, what a Jinn does. So if you see people getting possessed, sometimes it is supposedly by the Jinn. So then you get a priest or someone that can get rid of the Jinn or try and remove the Jinn. And what they do, if you talk to these people prior to going into a house, for example, they summon the light energies, which, although I said they're not good, they don't want the Jinn possessing people, because obviously they want to be inside someone, but they don't actually possess you. So the people that go in to try and depossess someone, they ask for spirit help. And so what happens is that he then goes into the building where this person's possessed, and the energy, the spirits, the light spirits, start attacking the Jinn to try and force the Jinn out. And then eventually, hopefully, the I'll call them good spirits, but they're not really good spirits. But eventually the good spirits win and the Jinn moves on and the circle carries on. So do I believe in Jinn? Not. The problem is there's not enough evidence on that. Although, you can talk to hundreds of clairvoyants and people like that who will say, yes, there are. But for me personally, it's not that it's just not enough evidence for me to say that they are a race on their own. But if they're there, then they're not good for humans, if that makes sense. I'm wondering if you believe in it. That's from Kingsy001. Kingsy's saying that they're not all bad, the Jinn. Well, I'm only going by what I've sort of, my research, they all come up that they're not doing it for humans' goodness, shall we say. So Big Z Daddy, or Big Zaddy, as wrote, so basically there were superhero hybrids before the flood. Yeah, so if you haven't watched any of my videos, if not, why not? I sort of explain how the Bible was, unfortunately, and I hate saying the word Bible because I grew up disliking the Bible because I knew that it wasn't right. And anyway, so the Bible is unfortunately a retelling of older texts. That's official. There's no denying that. Unfortunately, the Bible's been changed, blah, 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 over the years by different people for different reasons. So prior to the flood, what you actually had was a race of beings. I know it all sounds far-fetched, but when you start looking at the evidence, the actual carvings of them, their descriptions, the fact that the writing was prior to any humans being on the Sumerian text can be dated prior to 300,000 years ago when the first Homo sapiens sapiens were here, and so on and so on. So basically an alien race came here to mine for gold because they needed gold. Yes, I know it sounds like, oh, why do they need gold? We like gold. They're the ones that taught us about gold. So if you go to the ancient texts, it says a race of beings came down, started to mine for gold about 450,000 years ago. Over that period, they started off in Mesopotamia, which is why there's the first proper language, pretty much first everything started from Mesopotamia, which is ancient, is now modern Iran, Iraq, that sort of area, right up to Egypt. So 300,000 years ago, they were still mining, and they didn't like the workers, the Anunnaki workers, didn't like the fact that they was having to dig. Now I know people was argued and said, well, hang on a minute, why haven't they got magic technology that if they can come here, they should have magic technology to dig for gold easily. But we have the same problems now. We can supposedly travel to the moon, but we still need machines, and that's technology that they may not have had. They may have. If you watch my videos, I explain how they have certain technologies that's superior to what we've got, but they also use things like swords. So they were backwards in certain areas, and I explain why, because we're all sitting here thinking, well, if we can do it, they can do it. But a little thing called electricity has helped us tremendously. If we didn't have that, we would still be using steam or coal and things like that. So yes, we have got modern trains, electric trains and things like that, but if we didn't have electric, we would have been using steam still. So they were behind. Anyway, cutting back to your superhero thing. So basically, the Anunnaki then created humans, which is the story of Adam and Eve, but they actually did it 300,000 years ago. But that was the original Adam and Eve, which don't ever get written about. That was the one where they took the rib. So that unfortunately the Bible gets mixed up. Way down the line, about 100,000 years ago, one of the Anunnaki princes, which is called Enki, had relationships with one of the humans that was created 300,000 years ago. So after 200,000 years, he decides to have relationships with two human women. One bore a boy called, well, we all know Adam, but his real name was Adapa. And one was a girl, which we now know as Eve. And then them two children had children, which was Cain, Abel, Seth. So that's the story. So whether or not they were superheroes, I wouldn't have said they were superheroes, but they were pre the flood. And then eventually, because the Enkis, because of the Anunnakis having a relationship with the humans that they had created 300,000 years ago, all those humans spread out, etc. But some of these ended up being the Nephilim, which were the giants of old, as it says in the Bible. Bible's got a lot of things right, but unfortunately it's also got a lot of things wrong. And that's where people go, I don't really get the Bible. It just sort of, that just doesn't quite gel. But obviously if you watch my videos, do your own research as well, please. But you'll see my version, and it's not just my version, obviously other people's, I'm just retelling what I've learned. It makes more sense than the Bible. And I'll just scroll on now. So Sir Lancelot has wrote, when is Nibiru supposed to be making its next pass? Anything in ancient literature? Well, there is in ancient literature. I've mentioned before that certain groups of people, so the Hopi Indians have mentioned it. And it's got different names: Wormwood, the Dark Destroyer, or Blue Destroyer. Sorry, one of those two. But anyway, is it due round? If it is, it could be anywhere. The problem is no one's got sort of a exact calendar. Obviously, people thought that the Mayan early on, way before 2012, people thought the Mayan calendar was going to be predicting its return. But obviously, for people that's smart enough, they realise that the Mayan calendar had to end at some point. It just couldn't carry on. There was no. So of course, when it ended, as with any calendar, we now have yearly calendars. But imagine if you had one and you picked a date in the future. Could you imagine the people in the future going, "Oh, that calendar's come to an end, so therefore the world's coming to an end"? No, it just means the calendar come to an end. It ran out. There's no point in doing it infinity. So there's no real date for the Nibiru coming back. It could be anywhere from sort of 50 years to 300-400 years. Although the time frame is given as 3,600 years as the elliptical orbit, so every 3,600 years it's due back. But that's just sort of a rough guess. So you could give or take 1,000 years. I mean, or a couple of thousand years even. But that's just a rough guess that everyone's sort of worked out where they believe it would be. So I don't think it's coming anytime soon. I do believe the secret, the military people around the world are aware of it, and I believe that they've built those absolutely humongous underground cities. If anyone's done any research or just do some research, they're massive. They're literally cities underground. America's got about 178, and there was last count probably 10 years ago. There's about 250 around the world. So America's got most of them. China built one. England's got a sort of a smaller version. So you got to ask yourself, why would they want to build that? Is it just for nuclear weapons? Probably not. So why would they need to hide that amount of people, a city size, underground? So I don't think we're in any danger at the moment. But even if it was coming around, there's not a lot we can do up here. They've got the right idea. They'll go. The elites will go underground and weather it out. We'll be stuck up here. The suggestion is that it's coming. So it depends on the orbit of where we are compared to the sun, compared to the other planets, compared to Nibiru, where we are on how much damage it will cause to us. Apparently it's about 4 times the size of Earth. So its gravitational forces will affect Earth more than Earth will affect it. So if it comes round, and the speculation is that it's actually going to be fairly close this time. So 3,600 years ago it was slightly further away and wouldn't have affected us that much. But if it comes round when they think it's coming round, then both of us will be fairly close together. We'll get bombarded with meteorites first, because it's supposedly comes round with a dead star. So we was actually a binary star system. So it comes round with that, and it comes round with a lot of debris, rocks and things like that, supposedly. So we'll know about it with these massive rocks that is going to be smashing into Earth. That'll be the first problem we have. And then obviously, as it comes round, it only takes about 15 days for it to, for the damage to start and then it to sort of subside. Obviously, as it carries on leaving, going back round, we're still going to be hit with rocks and meteorites and whatever. But the damage would cause tidal waves as it comes round from the gravity. This is what they say. And possibly set off volcanoes. There has been talk that it could set off Yellowstone, but I mean, anyone can just say anything, but I'm just throwing that out there for you guys. If it does come and it is close, it's probably not going to be nice. We'll survive, people will survive as they always do. But the elites will probably be a lot better off where they will hide. Kingsley, they're on their own they're their own beings. They don't have to attach to anything. No, that's right. So going back to the Jinn, what I'm saying is that I didn't mean that they had to attach something. They do attach themselves to things. Sorry, I didn't make myself clear. Yeah, no, they're the same as the light beings that enter us. They're around us now, and they're everywhere if they want to be. And same as the Jinn can be around you now. They don't have to attach themselves to something. But that's the general thing that I've learnt from my research, is that they do like to attach themselves to things, people, objects, things like that. S4547, do you believe aliens who did not hibernate after their existence, they were humans from the future? It's a good question. I years and years ago, I used to think that the little greys. This is before I've done as much research as I have. I used to think the little greys were us in the future, and I've heard the stories from people, even people that supposedly in the know, have said, they've come back because they've messed themselves up, so they come back to take our DNA and blah blah blah. I don't see that at all. There was one person that said that they left Earth and then inhabited 2 other planets, which is, I'm guessing they're throwing it out there that they're the Zeta Reticulis, that we are them in the future. But I can't see that at all now. Knowing what I know now, I can't see that. So I don't think there's any aliens that are us from the future. I used to, before I carried on doing what I did, but now I can't see it, I'm afraid. S4547 wrote, I speak Sumerian language. If you do, that's very impressive. Can you read it as well? Are we talking sort of the ancient Sumerian? Because that, to me, that is the actual language of the gods. Because the Anunnaki were called the Elohim, that's their race name. I know we call them gods, blah blah blah, but it breaks down that if you read all the proper writings, the same as angel is wrong. People that wrote these translations many years ago, obviously, they didn't know as much as we know now. But when you break it down, you realise that the angel is a real flesh and blood Anunnaki, as opposed to an ethereal being that's floating around. That's not to say there's not spirits. I'm saying that the name Elohim was translated to, a god, but really it's actually their race name. So that's interesting if you can speak the language. Sean McGarity, if I always pronounce people's names wrong, forgive me. I'm interested in your Bigfoot theory. Where I live are many sightings in my area. Good, that's brilliant. And the reason, I'm glad you said that, because people say that they're interdimensional. And the reason why they say that is because sometimes they've been seen with with greys, and sometimes they sort of fairly quickly disappear. And so people say they're interdimensional. But because you've just said that, Sean, it sort of validates my position, and I don't think the ones on Earth are interdimensional, have the ability to travel, because you've probably heard stories that people have seen them running across the road and things like that. People's taken shots at them. So many stories of that. They hide in barns overnight, and they travel along the railway tracks. They supposedly migrate along the river and things like that. So if they were interdimensional, why the hell would they want to stay on Earth wading through water to catch fish? And they've been seen doing that many a time. Why would they do that unless their planet or their other dimension is worse than ours? So the reason why my theory then is, and this is from people that's supposedly spoke to them, but it kind of makes sense to me. And when I say spoke to them, in their mind speak, they telepathically talk. We're one of the only species apparently that doesn't do the mind speak, and I wonder if that's anything to do with what our government give us, fluoride in the water, fluoride in toothpaste, things like that to dumb us down. But anyway, that's another story. So the take on for me on Bigfoot is the ones that are here, crashed here over 10,000 years ago on a prison ship. Now that's was said by a few people that have spoke to them or been in communicating with them. And they obviously bred and stayed here and so on and so forth. And we know it's over 10,000 years, or I know it's over 10,000 years, because they travelled from America, which is somewhere where they crashed. And back then you could actually walk across to Russia. There was a land bridge. And of course, we know that Himalayas and places like that, and Russia's got Bigfoots, the same Bigfoots. The Yowies, I believe, are different. The ones in Australia, I think I think they are possibly interdimensional ones. But anyway, going back to the ones here on Earth. So, the ones on here on Earth, in America, they were the ones are now are descendants of descendants, which were on a prison ship. Now, the actual race of Bigfoots have been seen so many times. There's so many stories by credible eyewitnesses, dating back to the 1940s, of seeing shall we say, a Chewbacca with greys, with the little greys. So, the witnesses have seen them coming out of ships, going into ships, all sorts of things. So, if they see, this is why I see it. I think that they are beamed up, and we know that UFOs can beam up people. They do it all the time. That's where the abductions go. So if if they put a UFO down and suddenly it's gone, the chances are, my thoughts are, it was one of the ones that are still flying around. They've probably got their own planet and everything else that they live on. But that's not to say they don't travel through dimensions, because there's only one person I've ever heard say it, but again, whether that's true or not. And he said that a Bigfoot was walking towards a shiny sort of curtain that, was shimmering. And the person thought, oh, I want to go through that. And then the Bigfoot, as he was walking towards it, so obviously the person was hiding from the Bigfoot, but could see this sort of portal thing. The Bigfoot's mind speak said to him, if you go through that, you ain't coming back, in words to that effect. But that's only one person's story I've heard, where a Bigfoot I've heard Bigfoots carrying orbs, which is the energy beings. I've heard lots of stories of that. Whether it's a dead Bigfoot's orb or life energy or ghost, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. But that's the only time I've heard of a Bigfoot with a port standing near a portal of any kind. David Gordon's wrote, I'm obviously behind on the messages now, so I'm not quite sure where this is, but David's wrote, apart from the Bible, which book gives more accurate reading? Apart from which book would give the more accurate reading? So if you're referring to, because there's two types, for me there's two types of the Bible. There's the Bible that was written prior to the Bible, which was the Sumerian tablets and cuneiform and cylinder seals, etc. And then you had the Babylonian, the Aramaic, the Akkadian, I'm probably getting it wrong, I'm a bit tired today. And then came the Bible copying those. But the reason why I say there's two versions of the Bible, to me, is then when the Anunnaki left, they stopped writing. So then other people carried on writing the Bible. So then you've got now real people talking about real events that happen instead of copying. And that's obviously shows up to or from sort of Jesus's time. So we can work out that the Anunnaki left probably 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, and then after that, the normal humans started filling out the book with what's happening now. So if you look back at the original text from the original people that wrote in the Bible in the second half, like I say, the people that sort of writing it there and then as opposed to copying. There's a priest, I can't remember, I was trying to look him up yesterday. I've done a video on him, so I'll be getting back round to him again. I can't remember his name. Now he has done, I'm not sure if he's a priest or a vicar or something like that, an American word for it. But he has done, went through the original text instead of the Bible. So if you can look him up, forgive me, I can't remember his name. I did look yesterday. I spent about 25 minutes looking for him again. I couldn't remember his name. But he's on one of my videos. And I think he might be on the one that's actually on YouTube about Jesus. But he retranslated the Bible, the original text, and you'll be amazed at how, now we know what we know, how the translations all break down. compared to what was written back then. So where they're talking about, Jesus being born and how Mary was given birth, etc. I don't want to do him I forget that word. Injustice, that's it. But his fantastic writings, what he's translated, will make you start realizing that Jesus isn't who we think he is, as in son of an almighty being. You'll realize that he is a hybrid. But of course, people that wrote that back then didn't even know what an alien was, so they just wrote what they thought would be happening, and that obviously they'd heard about God from the Anunnaki, 450,000 years ago, so they knew about God. So of course they equated Jesus' birth to a god. But when you read what this guy's retranslated the original writings from, it totally makes more sense. Absolutely makes more sense. Sorry, I'll just go on. Hi, Mickey, who says, super late, my man, making sure you to hydrate. Yes, I thought I'd come on late today, see if I can get some of the people that normally want to listen to me waffling on. I just had a drink before I came on. Sean has wrote, thank you so much, very interesting. You're more than welcome. I will carry on waffling. There's no more questions. Unless someone has anything to do with anything, any questions, I will try and ask. The one topic I do try and avoid is obviously the stuff that's going on at the moment. I've got my own thoughts on that, and I'd heard things in the past where people had remote viewed future and clairvoyance and things like that. So I've got my own views on what's happening right now with... you must know what I'm talking about. But I have to be careful because obviously if I put this on YouTube, as we know, it will get censored, and Facebook is censoring absolutely everything, regardless of whether it's real or not. They'll take it down. So that's the only subject that I struggle with talking about, even though I've got my own thoughts on it. It's a shame. So is heaven real? Augustine's asked. Excellent question. So heaven. Okay, so if you go right back to the original text, for example, the Book of Enoch, where the Book of Enoch says, so you got the firmament, which they struggled to get through. So that's basically, people now call it a dome, but it's not. It's just the atmosphere. They struggled to get through the atmosphere, and that makes total sense because they use rocket ships. We know that from the descriptions, even in the Bible, about fire and light coming from the back of this thing and whatever else and being taken up in it. So their planet has dwindling atmosphere, and that's the reason why they needed gold. So they could leave their planet, just like if we left the moon, it's easier to leave the moon than it is to leave Earth, or enter the moon than enter the Earth. So anyway, so when they got here, they struggled with the firmament, which was obviously back then no one knew the word atmosphere. So they struggled with the atmosphere. But in the Book of Enoch, it talks about above the atmosphere or firmament, there's stars in the heaven. Now we can't have stars in the heaven because we can see the heaven, we can see the stars. So you realise then that okay, it's worded in such a way that heaven really should just mean space. So in terms of heaven, as in floating above the clouds, and an almighty being and everything else, there's no heaven. It's just unfortunate we've all followed that word down. Even now to this day, if I hit myself with a hammer, I say, "Oh, Jesus Christ." But I don't mean that. It's just we're just all brought up to believe by saying these over and over again. It sort of feels like it's real. So if I said heaven, you'll think, "Oh, angels and whatever else." But when you realise angels is just a word for Anunnaki, and heaven should have actually been space, but of course they didn't know space back then. So yeah, that's just one example from the Book of Enoch, but there's many more examples of why heaven should be space. So to answer your question, is there a real heaven? In other words, a place for spirits to go? You're looking at it. They're here. They're right beside you. They can go from here. They can go to another planet if they want. The spirits, there's no boundary for them. So there's no heaven. What you have got is frequency. So the good good people like yourselves, I'm sure, with good frequencies will, when you die, will stick around with other good frequency people. That's from what I understand, from what the many clairvoyants have said, and spiritualists, etc. They all say the same thing. But if you're bad and you want to cause harm, then your frequency is a lot lower. So you end up in a location type of thing, because the good people don't want to hang around with the bad people, just as, this is why you get segregation. But apparently that's how it is over there. And when I say over there, it's literally here. So there's segments of bad people, but they're lower frequencies after they've died. They're, if they're hanging around, if they haven't already crossed over again, because they can cross over again, and that's going up the different planes of existence. If they hang around with each other, that's generally what happens. But they have a life review anyway once they pass, and then the life review apparently is how other people felt about you and what you did to them. So they get a life review. But again, like I said earlier on, right at the beginning, is the spirits that at that point you're still part of that spirit until it crosses over again. But while you're there, you get that life experience of what happened. But it's not good. It's not good or bad. They just learn. So they could happily be a mass murderer, but they're not doing it evilly. They want to. So the spirit will join with someone that's a mass murderer, and it's not like, oh, that's really sick. Why are they doing that? That's them learning. So you've probably heard the phrase, the Earth is a training ground, or nursery for spirits, and it pretty much is. We're pretty one of the lowest frequencies out there of beings that they can attach themselves to. So heaven's not really real, except for when you cross over again. So when you die, you're here. You can be in the same room as you're in now if you want to, but then you can go to the light, as they say, and then that's when you cross over again, and that's pretty much when your consciousness that is you is now pushed back along the line with all the other consciousnesses that spirit's already been with. So that's where you get the reincarnation. So it will come back round, and sometimes you can, children mainly can remember past lives, or if you hypnotise, you can be past life regressed, and out comes your life that you're living now. But once you cross over, like I say, once you cross that light side, that you unfortunately seem to go. No one's ever. I've never heard anyone say that, and you as a, as with that entity comes back over. I've never heard that. So you sort of just go and be pushed to the back of the queue or front of the queue. Dodgy Davy has wrote, the New Testament was written by Aris. I'm terrible at pronunciations. Forgive me. And his family. Read the book, The True. Sorry, cut off there. Read the book. So yeah, again, if you look at the New Testament, you look at the Old Testament, you look at any of the Bibles. Like I say, there's two versions of it. You've got so that's why I say there's two versions. As I say, there's the original text that they copied from right until probably 5,000, 3,000 years ago. Then they've got their own writings, but again, their own writings, humans' writings, are have been changed over the years. You've got the Romans taking it out. You've got King James taking stuff out. Enoch was in the Bibles, the original Bibles, as I've mentioned many a time before. The Ethiopian Bible pretty much has majority of the correct stuff in it. So if you want to, if any religious people out there, go read the Ethiopian Bible. That's where the original, and again, the translations are still not 100%. Like I say, Angel's wrong, space is wrong. I must do a video of what I think the translations all make, and of course then it will all make sense as well. So even though you've got New Testaments, which is probably the humans writing it, you have to remember there's the bad people that make it the way they want it made. And like I say, Enoch, I think in the last Bible was mentioned once, compared to Christ knows how many times in the proper, like I say, the Ethiopian Bible. So they've taken things out over time. So, anyone, regardless of whether you're religious and how much you believe in it, you have to admit that powers that are controlling us have changed things. You can't. There's no denying that. So once you realise that they're changing things, then you got to ask yourself, why did they change these? Why did they get rid of the giants? Why did they get rid of Enoch? Why did they get rid of a lot of the words that was said before? So when you realise that they're doing it because they, take the Smithsonian for example. It appears that they had a court case in the 1900s, and they were subpoenaed and asked why they were destroying the giant skeletons. And I mean, we're talking giant skeletons. We're not talking 10, 15 foot. We're talking giant skeletons. And their argument was that they want the narrative that we all know now to be the correct one, as opposed to what really happened, which was obviously everything that I'm saying in my videos. So they had a court case over that. So when you've got, establishments like the Smithsonian, funded by Rockefellers, believe it or not. Once you've got establishments like that are trying to change things, and then you can go right back to the original Illuminati in the 1136 or 1137, I think it is. They have an agenda. Knights Templars had an agenda. Everyone's got an agenda. Unfortunately, it's the powers that be have the agendas, whereas the good guys like me and you, we're just happy to live our lives. And so whatever religion you are, just remember that there was no religion at the beginning. You're going to think, well, hang on a minute, how can there be no religion at the beginning? There must have been a religion at the beginning. No. The Anunnaki wanted humans to worship them, but there was no religion. There was no name for that. It wasn't Christian. There was no name. It wasn't. It was just, listen, we made you. You worship us. You bring us food. Lovely jubbly. That was what it was. Unfortunately, it looks like Abraham, possibly being a human or should we say, a hybrid of the Anunnaki, could see, this is my take on it, could see that by having power and being called gods, the lowly humans, because he possibly was a hybrid, the lowly humans were not worshipping, but obeying their gods. So he then come up with this first religion, and people then started, dumb humans started to, look after him and treat him as not as a god, but a priest, shall we say. And so that's how that all started. That's how the religion started. And then, of course, someone else got cottoned on and said, hang on, if he's freaking doing that, I'm going to do that. And that's how I think religion started. And that's probably the most logical version of it, because there was no, when you look at the true original text, yes, Enki did say, when the flood was about to happen, he said, denounce the gods, do not worship them, do not, follow them, do not this and that. And yes, temples were built in the honor of the gods, but again, there was no religion as such. There was no name for it. It was just they were built in honor of the gods. So anyone that follows the Bible, just break free for a moment. I don't mean to sound rude, because I know people absolutely devote to the Bible. Some people, even though there's paragraphs that just don't make sense. Of course, when you look at the original text, it does make sense. But just if you're into any Bible type thing, even the Quran, stop for a moment, go back, do as much research if you want to. You can obviously just follow blindly the books that people have changed over the years. But if you want to really find out where everything comes from and how, just go back to the original text. There's websites. I've done videos on showing there's websites out there that's broken down the original texts, and then put that together with your whatever Bible you're into, and then say, okay, which one kind of makes more sense? And obviously the original would make more sense than the copy that's have bits taken out of it. So hopefully that's helped in some way. So there's no more questions at the moment. So I will now pick a different subject. Unless someone else has got a question about anything, I will I will pick a subject, and I'm just trying to think what kind of subject I should pick. Just bear with me for a second. Because I put these live chats on YouTube, I don't want to try and repeat the same things over and over for people that listen to them on YouTube. And believe it or not, they're also on podcasts now. If you just type in Our True History Podcast, you'll find these boring live chats. So I'm just trying to think now of some subject to talk about. Pick crop circles. Hey, someone was listening to me. Thank you, Peach. Okay, so crop circles are fascinating. Yes, I don't know how much you know or whether you watched any of my videos. So the crop circles date back at least 400 years. Now, obviously, the BBC propagated that Doug and Dave had made them in the late 70s, but we know that's fake because Sir Patrick Moore had seen them in the 60s when he was flying over a field. So I won't go into why Doug and Dave done it, but let's just say the same reason now that these giant photographs, if you've seen the skeletons of giant skeleton photographs online where people were sort of supposedly working on, digging them up or something like that. There was a competition run a few years back to design these, Photoshop these giant skeletons in. And you can guess why and who backed that. Yes, the same people that were behind making sure people knew that humans were creating the crop circles and not a paranormal force. So unfortunately, just like with the skeleton photographs, they muddied the water. So now as soon as you type in giant skeleton, you'll see these giant skeletons on the internet, but it all leads back to this competition that was set up deliberately to spread out as many photographs, disinformation basically is what it is. And the same goes for the crop circles. But crop circles are still happening now, actually. Someone on YouTube asked me a question. I haven't actually replied yet, forgive me, so I'll reply on this. So they said, why is there no publicity of crop circles now? And that's a really good question, but the same reason that I've just answered. Unfortunately, because you've probably seen the adverts now, people, advert companies or sports companies have asked people to go out and make crop circles for their logos. And of course, that muddies the water again, more problems we have. So when there is a real crop circle, first of all, the newspapers don't want to cover it. And the reason why they don't want to cover it is because they're owned by... Okay, so there's 13 families, 14 if you include Mr. Gates, that now pretty much control the planet. The newspapers are told what they can and can't write and how to debunk things, so obviously aliens, they always put the old tinfoil hat comment in there. And the same goes with the crop circles. So as soon as Doug and Dave were paid by you-know-who to come out and say that they made crop circles, then obviously the newspapers loved that and they went with the humans make all crop circles. So the reason why there's no mention of it now is, one, is the newspapers don't want to tell us because there's no reason to, and two, even if it was an independent newspaper, there's no point because they wouldn't be 100% sure it's not man-made, and that's the muddying of the water that they've done. So yes, crop circles still happen all over the world. There are real researchers that go there and check it out, and you can tell which ones are real. Just go in there with anything with a battery, and you'll see your battery starts to die pretty quick. And the other way is the nodes. So on a crop circle, on a crop, they've got stems, and on the stems they've got these what they call nodes, which are knuckles really. And so it goes up, like 10 inches, for example. Then you've got a knuckle. Then it carries on growing for another knuckle, and then so on. And with a real crop circle, those are superheated by a microwave, and I'm not on about stuck in a real microwave. I'm on about by an orb or two orbs that have created this microwave energy that makes the crop circles literally bend instead of being flattened. So you can go to any crop circle, and if you really want to go in more in depth, the crop that's inside the crop circle yields, I think it's 400% more wheat than the crop circle than the crop outside of the real crop circle. So crop circles are a real phenomenon, but unfortunately just muddied the water. So if you need more direct questions answered to that, please let me know and I'll go into more detail. Killatron has wrote the Lotus Flower Universe. I've heard of it. I haven't looked into it. So if you want to sort of post up what your thoughts are on it, I would read it out. That would be great. Because I mean, you've got the we're all living on a tortoise going through space. There's all different types of universes. So I try and avoid the ones that sound. I'm not saying the Lotus Flower one is, but I'm just saying there's different versions out there of where we come from. So I try and avoid the ones where we're on a turtle's back floating through space. Pete just said, not seen many recently. You'd think with drones there would be lots to see. I'm guessing that's the crop circles. Yeah, again, though, there is professionals out there that go and research these crop circles daily. Of course, unfortunately, they get debunked when they come out with this information. There was that famous guy, Dr. Levingood, and he'd done all the research, peer reviewed and everything. But unfortunately, the mainstream will and do knock him down, unfortunately, and make him look silly. And the other thing is farmers don't like crop circles because obviously, and there's a big thing actually in the UK about it. Obviously, crop circles are worldwide, but there's a big thing that the farmers now are getting really annoyed at humans going in there trampling over their crop, because obviously this is crop that they want to sell. It got to a point in the 90s where literally every time you turn around, someone had gone in at night and knocked up a crop circle. So they get kind of annoyed people go in there. So the real professional researchers have got an understanding with some of the farmers that, as soon as a crop circle happens, can he notify them? So they go in and take samples or whatever else. But so as regards drones, the farmers probably won't allow people with drones to start going there, because clearly then it's a man-made thing, and if they haven't got the permission from the farmer, then he will just class it as trespassing. And I think farmers have it pretty bad after watching Jeremy Clarkson's farming show. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learnt a hell of a lot on that. Didn't know how much farmers go through. So I can imagine now, Jeremy Clarkson going there one morning and seeing a bloody flattened crop, and of course he'd be moaning like hell because that's money down the drain. So if you've got any more questions, feel free to ask. I will pick another subject at random, unless you guys can point me in a subject that I can waffle on about. I should really have a list of things to sort of say when no one asks the question. Sometimes I was doing these live chats and I had up to 99 messages for literally nearly an hour. People would just keep messaging and asking questions, and I just couldn't keep up. Killatron, there are megalithic rock structures in America that help seeds that are placed in it yield more. Okay, I'm not aware of that actually. That doesn't surprise me one slightest bit, because we know rocks can produce some sort of energy, vibrational frequency, especially limestone. So that totally makes sense. Now the question is whether they done that deliberately to yield more, or whether that was just they put it there and it's a byproduct of them putting the structures there. Because normally, if you go back to Michael Tellinger's work, the stone structures are help become a power grid. And he's done some excellent work on that. If you're not sure Michael, please look him up, Michael Tellinger. In fact, he's recently I've spoken to him about various things, but he's recently doing stuff on petrified trees that are giant. So if you've seen the pictures on TikTok, for example, of people saying, are these real trees that are now petrified? And I mean giant trees, talking mile high or more. He's now looking into that, so I'm not going to spoil any of his research on my little show here, but please look him out. But he going back to the stone structures. Yeah, he has come up with the theory, and I think it's a fantastic theory. He spent like 13 videos going through, just like I try and do. I try and do the videos so that eventually you'll catch on, and he did that. And after about 7 episodes, I was like, I caught on. Thank you, whoever sent a rose there. But I caught on after about 7 episodes of where he was going with it, and it just made so much sense. So his take on it is that the stone structures create a power grid, not necessarily just in there, but along lines as well. Now, obviously, there's other ancient structures, such as the stones in Karnak in France, which I don't know if you guys know of that. I must do a video on that. But they're massive stones going for miles, I think it is, in a formation, which is really weird. And obviously you've got Stonehenge. So not all structures are Stonehenge, I totally believe now after doing... If you watch my videos, you'll see that I've equated some text from the Book of Enoch to the which I don't think anyone else has done, actually. The Book of Enoch's text to the Stonehenge, and it seems to match perfectly that it is a calendar. And shows the equinoxes and stuff. Now, I wondered why they would do that, because obviously they're smart enough to know when the time is. Why make a massive one? These are really more intelligent than we give them credit for, the Anunnaki. So why would they need to keep putting these, like one in England? And they're all over the world, these henges, which would get some of them a lot smaller than Stonehenge. And I kept thinking, why would they do that? Why would they do it? I've come up with a reason, actually. And it's the fact that they're not here all the time. So the Anunnaki would have... forgive me, there's someone at the door. So the Anunnaki would have... sorry, one sec. Amy, I'm on a live chat. Sorry, whoever that is coming in the door, a stranger. So I've lost where I was now. So I was home today redecorating, and the stuff by the front door, and that person that's just walked in has now moaned the stuff by the front door. Ancient stones by the front door. I've completely lost where I was now. Forgive me. So I'm probably going to have to come to an end now, because that person that's just walked in is probably going to want to see me and find out what's going on with the redecoration. So I will probably have to call it a day now. I'm really sorry about that, but thank you very much for joining in. I'll stick this on YouTube anyway, and I'll try and do another one probably Wednesday or Thursday. Thank you, Killatron, for saying much love. But I'll try and do more live chats for you guys. But thank you very much for taking the time spending with me, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thank you. Bye.